Hello, so today we're going to be going over the effects of social media on college students' financial well-being, and to introduce ourselves, my name is Megan.
I'm Rachel.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Izzy.
So to give an overview of what we will be discussing today, we have a table of contents. So first is our introduction, then our literature review with some important terms, our hypotheses development, our hypotheses, our survey idea, variables, survey plan, descriptive interpretation, regression interpretation, implications of results, and then finally our conclusion. So to introduce what we will be discussing, what exactly is financial well-being? And according to Boston University, it's learning how to manage your money and resources responsibly with an eye towards the future. As college students, that's super important because we're entering that next step in our life where financials are a huge part of our careers, and so it's important to know how much social media does affect us. Which goes into the drawbacks of social media, and what we found was the feeling of peer pressure was the greatest thing, and that's maybe seeing your peers or classmates doing adventurous things or having certain items and having an increased spending pressure. And finally, the purpose of our study is if social media does positively or negatively affect our financial well-being. And so 98% of students are on social media, so we found this topic really interesting as college students because each of us are on social media or will be doing it in our careers.
So jumping into our literature review, we had three main topics or terms that we wanted to focus on. The first one being retail therapy, which is defined as going out shopping to make yourself feel better. And so kind of as group 3 was talking about, you have a day and you go out by a Starbucks, maybe you're at Target and you walk away with a full cart. Next is impulse buying. Impulse buying is going somewhere and making a purchase without planning on it. And I feel like a lot of people do kind of indulge with that. Studies show that about 7.4% of people have indulged in impulse buying, but that number has been decreasing over the years and it's thought to be due to inflation. Finally, we have peer pressure. Peer pressure is defined as buying something or doing something that your peers or people your same age are doing to make yourself feel like you'll fit in better. And by the time you reach college, 9 out of 10 kids have fallen into peer pressure in some way.
Okay, so moving on into our hypothesis development, we noticed while doing our research that a lot of students believe they need to keep up with the trends of everyday life. So that may include things like buying something that they see trending online or on your For You page. You see it and you're like, oh, well, they all have it, so I should have it too. A lot of students are under a lot of stress and pressure as it is just to fit in society or in their classroom settings. And then often when students buy these specific items, they will feel like these items might lead them to success, but that's never actually the case. So there's a few different tools that NMU has to help us with that, and one of those is the NMU Wellbeing Center. You can use that. You can use that to help students better understand your financial struggles, and then also they'll give you tools to help you maybe manage your time in a more productive manner.
So from this, we've developed 2 hypotheses for our survey. The first one looks at if the more time students spend on social media, then they will be more likely to make impulsive purchases because they've been influenced. As Megan explained, 98% of college students are on social media, and of this 98%, an average of 4.5 hours is spent just on social media alone per day. So because of this, we wanted to look at and see if there was a correlation between the amount of time spent on social media and the amount of impulsive purchases made. And then our second hypothesis looks at if college students feel peer pressure from social media, then it will negatively affect their financial well-being. In a study done by Karen Bennett, about 51% of people say that social media promotes an unrealistic lifestyle. So given this, we wanted to look at to see if college students feel the same, if they are facing peer pressure from social media, and then that is affecting their negatively affecting their financial well-being.
And so to move on to our survey idea, so like we said we measured social media and the effects of college students' financial well-being. So it took us, we did a collection for about a month, and it took each person who took the survey around 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And so we hope that everyone who took our survey understood that the amount of impulse purchases that they made could be affecting their financial well-being.
So moving on to what our variables are, our independent variables are ones that won't be affected by anything else, and that is the amount of time spent on social media and the feeling of peer pressure. And the first one would be studied by the Slider scale, and the feeling of peer pressure will be used with the Likert scale. And then for our dependent variables, we have making impulsive purchases and one's financial well-being. So for example, one's financial well-being depends on the feeling of peer pressure. And so later on in the presentation, we'll show you how these variables affected each other.
So looking at our survey plan, our main population was NMU students, but as you'll see farther on into our presentation, we did have a small portion that were students from other universities. Our main criteria was any gender and currently enrolled in college. Originally, we did want it to be just NMU students, but it ended up getting farther out into other universities. Our survey, it included submitting your age, reading the directions, signing the consent form, and then as Megan mentioned, we did use the Slider scale, multiple choice, and the Likert scale. And then for recruiting, we used email, social media, and word of mouth. And we found that word of mouth did help a lot since we showed people the QR code in person, and they did the survey right there then. And then we were able to send it out to sports teams as well as clubs that we're in, which helped us gain more numbers.
So these are photos from our survey, which we conducted on Qualtrics, and then this is a Likert scale, and this one we used a Slider scale, and this was a multiple choice question to collect our data.
Okay, so moving on into our descriptive interpretation. So we decided to take all of our demographic questions and results and kind of break them down. So just so that we could better understand where the majority of our responses were coming from and like what kind of person was answering our questions the most. And we actually made some charts to show you that in the next couple slides. And we ended up with a total of 142 completed responses. So that was 142 people that finished our survey from start to end.
So to get a better idea of like who is actually taking our survey, we found out how much yearly income each person has. And so for our biggest scale was 35.9%, which was less than 10,000, which kind of makes sense for college students that don't have jobs or maybe just part-time jobs. And then our grader, the second greatest one was 29.6%, was 10,000 to about $20,000 per year. The number we were like most surprised about was the 19% for 40,000 to almost $50,000 per year. And we weren't sure if our question wasn't worded correctly, if maybe they were answering for maybe their household or their family income. So if we were to do it again, we would make sure to make sure the question is specific enough to know that it's only about themselves and not anyone else.
So we next looked at the education demographics, and as you can see on the chart, 59% or so have some college but no degree. 60% are high school graduates. 7.7 have an associate's degree. 12% have a bachelor's, and 0.7 have a master's degree. So we were looking at anyone with that is currently enrolled in college, no matter what their past education background is. And we're confident that participants, even those who have a bachelor's, master's, or associate's degree, that they are still working toward another degree, or they're in the process of completing those degrees. And we don't think that this will affect or negatively affect our data in any way.
And for our age range, we had 97.1% between the ages of 18 and 24. We had 2.2% between the ages of 25 to 34, and then 0.7% with 35 plus. And we think the 35 plus age range is probably due to people who maybe have returned back to school and are just in that older range.
And then finally, like I mentioned previously, here's the graph to kind of break down who we had from NMU and our other universities. So our main was 88.7% from NMU, and then that small portion is 8.5 from a different university. And we did send it to some friends back home, which is where we think we kind of got that number from.
And for our regression interpretation, we used the program SPSS to determine if our hypotheses were supported or not. And we used the simple regression analysis because each of our hypotheses included one independent and one dependent variable. And just to remind you guys what our variables are, our dependent variables are making impulse purchases and one's financial well-being, and our independent variables are amount of time spent on social media and the feeling of peer pressure.
Okay, so moving on into our first hypothesis. For our first hypothesis, we also use simple linear regression model, and our results proved a significant relationship between time spent on social media and impulsive purchasing behavior. We concluded that a student's impulsive purchasing behavior was negatively affected by each hour spent on social media. So the more time a student was spending on social media, the more likely they were to make more impulsive purchases based off of what they were looking at on social media. And our results were significant because our p-value was 0.017, which was less than that 0.05 threshold.
And so this is the simple linear regression results for our second hypothesis. And it doesn't prove a significant relationship between the feeling of peer pressure from social media and negative financial well-being, and which disproves our second hypothesis because the p-value is insignificant because it's greater than 0.05. So there's no significant relationship. This did surprise us a little bit. We were kind of thinking that based on like past research done, that there would be like a significant relationship here, and that our hypothesis would be proved true, but we were wrong, and the data proved our hypothesis wrong.
So to kind of reiterate everything that Rachel and Hannah just said, so the greater amount of time spent on social media had a greater amount of impulse purchases, so that was found to be significant and correct. And then our second hypothesis, the greater amount of peer pressure from social media negatively affects their financial well-being. We found this to be insignificant and incorrect. So we were thinking, since social media is so popular upon all of us, I'm assuming, we think it's important for colleges to implement ways to distress from social media, whether that would be through a lecture or a workshop. We think that would probably help that.
So kind of do a little overview of the presentation. As Hannah and Rachel mentioned, our first hypothesis was proven true. Our second one had no significance, that peer pressure had played a role in your financial well-being. And then we mostly did this survey to find out how social media is affecting our financial well-being. Since, like Caitlin said, we do all have social media and have a presence on it most days. And if we did further our research, we would want to do a larger sample size. And we also did talk about kind of reaching out to a generation older than us, since they didn't have as much social media presence in college, to kind of see how that affected them compared to us with social media. And then we'd also want to look into why the peer pressure did not play as much of a role into it. So thank you.